This is accounting for government and non-profit organizations, and we will now continue the discussion with inventories. The following will be the learning objectives for this discussion. For you to be able to account for inventories by a government entity and to describe the procedures in the receipt and disposition of inventories by a government entity. Inventories are assets held for sale or distribution in the ordinary course of operations, which may take the form of finished goods, or they are in the process of production for sale or distribution, or yung mga nasa work in process. Or they may also take the form of materials or supplies to be consumed in the production process or distributed in the rendering of service, just like raw materials and supplies. More specifically, the inventories of a government entity consists of the following. We have inventory held for sale, just like yung medicines for sale in the government pharmacies. Inventory held for distribution. Examples are the rice and other welfare goods held for distribution. Inventory held for manufacturing, just like yung raw materials and yung mga work in process. Inventory held for consumption, katulad ng mga office supplies inventory and other materials. Or meron din tayo ng tinatawag na semi-expandable property, which consists of machinery, equipment, furniture, and similar items that are not capitalized as property, plant, and equipment because they do not meet the capitalization threshold, which is 15,000. Measurement. At initial recognition, inventories are measured at cost. Subsequently, they are measured depending on whether the goods are held for sale or for distribution. For goods held for sale, they are subsequently measured at the lower of cost or net realizable value. On the other hand, for goods held for distribution, they are subsequently measured at the lower of cost and current replacement cost. The following comprises the cost. The purchase cost, excluding trade discount. Direct cost, incurred in bringing the asset to its intended location and condition. And the following are excluded in the cost computation. Abnormal amounts of wasted materials, labor and production overhead, selling cost, and administrative overheads. When we say net realizable value, this is the estimated selling price less estimated cost of completion and estimated selling or disposal costs. Current replacement cost naman is the cost the entity would incur to acquire the asset on the reporting date. So what are the available cost formulas na pwedeng gamitin ng mga government entities? So cost of goods sold and cost of inventories on hand are determined using the following cost formulas. First, specific identification. So this shall be used for items that are not ordinarily interchangeable, or ibig sabihin, yung mga unique na items, and those that are segregated for specific projects. Second is the weighted average cost. This shall be used for large numbers of items of inventory that are ordinarily interchangeable, and this shall be applied under a perpetual inventory system. Government entities shall use the perpetual inventory system, and in this system, purchases, sales, and other transactions affecting the inventory are recorded in the inventory and cost of sales account as appropriate. Moreover, stock cards and stock ledgers are maintained. Take note, the FIFO cost formula and the periodic inventory system are not used are not used by the government entities. So we have the following journal entries to be made at initial recognition of the inventories. So the entry will depend as to the depending on the purpose of the inventory. So for inventory held for sale, the merchandise inventory is debited. So these entries are made under the assumption of the purchase is made on account. Okay? So if you want to check the account name to be used, so you may refer doon sa ating GAM for NGAs volume 2 for the chart of accounts. For inventory held for distribution, the inventory is debited in the welfare goods for distribution. For inventory held for manufacturing, the inventory is debited in the raw materials inventory account. For inventory held for consumption, the inventory is debited in the office supplies inventory account, and for semi-expandable properties, the inventory is debited in the semi-expandable machinery account. Recognition as an expense. So when will this amount of inventory be recognized as an expense? If you would go back in the entries provided earlier, at initial recognition, the inventories are debited in the asset account. So the carrying amount of an inventory is recognized as an expense in the period it is sold, it is distributed, it is exchanged, it is consumed, or when it is written down to its net realizable value or current replacement cost. In which case, only the proportion of the carrying amount in excess of the NRV or CRC is recognized as an expense. We will now proceed to the receipt and disposition of inventories. So we will discuss the procedures in the receipt and disposition of government inventories. So yung procedure starts with the requisition. Okay? So first, the end users prepare the purchase request form. So the purchase request document is made to request for the purchase of items not available in stock. So the PR or the purchase request will be the basis in preparing the purchase order. But first, when we say end users, so this refers to the individuals who will actually be using the items. Let's say, for example, the end users of office supplies are those who are working in the office. The end users of cleaning materials are the janitors. So the request for the purchase starts with the preparation of the purchase request form. So once the purchase request form is made, then the authorized official will now prepare the purchase order. So the purchase order is a document issued to the supplier when making a purchase. Ibig sabihin, ito yung parang contracting document between the government entity na bibili ng inventory and the supplier who shall supply the inventory. So in the purchase order document, indicated doon yung specifications, yung quantities, and agreed prices of items being purchased. So the PO serves as the contract. As mentioned nga earlier, it serves as the contract between the entity and the supplier. Okay? So, yung usual practice for government procurement is that we follow the procedures provided in the GPPB, or the Government Procurement Policy Board. Okay? So by default, the usual procurement process is undergone using the bidding procedure. But we also have alternative method of procurement which can be availed in special cases. Pero at the minimum, for purchases amounting 1,000 and above, a canvas should be made from at least 3 suppliers. So we have here sample forms of the purchase request and purchase order document. So if you want to look at the forms, the standard forms used in the government transactions, you may refer doon sa ating GAMPR NGA's volume 3. So provided doon yung mga forms used in the government transaction. So in Appendix 60 and Appendix 61, makita nyo doon yung purchase request document and purchase order. Bali sa volume 2, pala siya ng ating GAMPR NGAs. So doon nyo makikita yung forms natin. So if you can see in the purchase request, so yung purchase request, this is signed by the end user na nag-request nung purchase nung inventory. And this shall be approved by the head of the procuring entity. So yung head of the procuring entity natin, siya usually yung pinakamataas na official in the government entity. Let's say for example, in Romblon State University, the head of the procuring entity is the university president. So all of the purchase requests submitted by the respective end users are approved by the university president. So in the purchase request, nakalagay doon yung unit ng item na bibilhin with the corresponding item description and the allotted budget amount for the purchase. And then once na yung purchase request is approved, then yung ating authorized official to prepare the purchase order shall now prepare the purchase order. And in the purchase order, makita nyo dito, since this serves as the contract between the government entity and the supplier, conform dito yung supplier, acknowledging yung receipt ng order. And then, in the right side, is magsasign dito is yung head of the procuring entity. To continue with the procedure, so once na dumating na, okay, so nakapag-order na ng inventory yung government entity with the supplier as evidenced by the purchase order. So once na makomplete ng supplier yung delivery ng inventory, then the property or supply division will now prepare the inspection and acceptance report, or the IAR. And the IAR will be used by the property inspector in inspecting and accepting the delivered items. So the property supply division will now forward yung delivery receipt and the inspection and acceptance report and yung purchase order to the property inspector. So this is for the purpose of checking whether the quantity of the inventories delivered correspond to what is stated in the purchase order. At the same time, chine-check din dito yung quality, if whether the quality of the delivered items correspond doon sa specification. And then, the property inspector inspects the conformance of the delivered items with the specifications in both the PO and DR, and then indicates the result of the inspection. Okay, whether the items are accepted or whether the items are rejected. So if ever may rejected deliveries, this will be returned to the supplier. The property inspector, after no, the property inspector forwards the copies of the delivery receipt, the inspection and acceptance report, and the purchase order to both the property supply division and the accounting division for recording. Okay? So the property supply division records the accepted deliveries in the stock card. So yung stock card, which is maintained to monitor yung inventory natin under the perpetual inventory system. So, ang may hawak nito is the property and supply division. And then, the accounting division naman records the accepted delivery in the books of accounts and in the supplies ledger card. So, the accounting division maintains a supplies ledger card to record yung accepted deliveries. So, as internal control, usually, nagkakaroon tayo ng reconciliation between the records of the property supply division and the record of the accounting division. Usually, at the end of the year, when we try to establish yung amount ng inventory, nagkakaroon ng reconciliation because supposedly, the amount stated in the stock card dapat mag-correspond doon sa supplies ledger card na maintained in the accounting division. And then after, the property supply division prepares the disbursement voucher. So since na render na deliver ng supplier yung inventories, then may obligation na yung government entity to pay the supplier. The reason why the disbursement voucher will be made. Okay? So, yung disbursement voucher, it will be forwarded together with the supporting document to the accounting division for the processing of payment. So, we have here the template for the inspection and acceptance report and the stock card. Okay? So, in the inspection and acceptance report, i-report lang naman doon yung description ng items delivered to the corresponding unit and signed by the inspector, and dito is specify whether the delivery is accepted or rejected. And in the stock card, so once that the delivery are accepted, so yung supply or yung property division records the delivered items in the stock card. So dito, recorded lang yung quantity and then yung balance of the balance nung inventory. So lahat ng changes with the inventory, for example, may na-issue na inventory doon sa end user, then the changes will be reflected dito sa stock card. At the end of the day, every after may movement sa inventory, then magkakaroon ng current balance to be presented in the second to the last column. And then, this is the template for the supplies ledger card. Again, this is maintained by the accounting division. So, yun nga, as an internal control, merong reconciliation between the records of the property and supply division and the accounting division. So, niya-reconcile yung records of stock card with the records in the supplies ledger card. And this is the example of a disbursement voucher. So, itong disbursement voucher, this is the kasi voucher system yung pina-follow natin in the disbursement. So, lahat ng disbursement ng government entities are supported by a disbursement voucher. So, ito yung instrument that instructs yung payment for the disbursement. And then, in the disposition of the inventories natin, so, para mabigay doon sa end users yung inventories. So yung end users, upon information ng Property and Supply Division na available na yung kanilang requested inventories, so yung end user will now prepare the requisition and issue slip or the RAS to request for the issuance of inventory. So once na nasubmit yung RIS sa Property and Supply Division and inapprove ng supply officer yung issuance, then the supply and or Property Division will now prepare the report of supplies and materials issued. Okay? So yung stock card is updated using the report of supplies and materials issued. Okay, so yung basis nung record ng issuance ng inventories in the stock card of the Property or Supply Division is evidenced by the RSMI. Okay, and yung RSMI, yun din yung ginagamit ng Accounting Division in updating the records in the stock ledger card. So ito yung template ng requisition and issue slip and the report of supplies and materials issued. So we also have the following other documents which are used in several cases. Okay, so we have waste material reports, which are used to report wasted materials, such as meron tayong mga inventories that are destroyed, katulad ng mga spare parts and other spoilages. We also used report on the physical count of inventories for reporting the results of physical count. So at the end of the accounting period, to verify the presented amount of inventory in the record, we verify it by physical count. And then we also have report of accountability for accountable forms, which are used to report the movement and status of accountable forms, and the inventory custodian slip, which are prepared when issuing semi-expendable property. This is accounting for